Hey everyone, it's Jessica from the Art of Education, and I am here today to talk with you a little bit more about DBAE. It is a curriculum philosophy, discipline-based art education. Now, this philosophy, or movement if you'd like to call it, originated with the Getty Foundation in the 1980s and then early 90s, and it was a very specific formula or program that teachers could follow to teach art. They had also a very extensive professional development package that teachers could be trained in DBAE. I think that discipline-based art education is a great place for teachers to start. It's a great formula to get in the four main areas of DBAE, which are art criticism, so being able to look at, judge, talk about art history, learning about art history and culture throughout history, aesthetics, the meaning, students considering the meaning of art, reflecting on their work, and doing some more critique of art, and then also production, which is one of the most important parts, as we know, actually making art using skills and techniques. So these are four things you probably already are doing at some level, but this formula wanted to make sure that all these things happened in a lesson. Now, I personally used a lot of DBAE in my teaching career. I'm not in the classroom anymore, but it was the foundation for the basic lessons that I used. Not every lesson used DBAE. I strayed, but this was, I would say, the main core concepts. I always wanted to hit these four areas. And the reason was, I felt it is a great way for you to have it all. I saw students for such a short amount of time. I wanted to get in all these things, but it seemed almost impossible. So being able to kind of use this formula and hit them in a lesson was really helpful to me, and I think is a great place, to start. I also like this interdisciplinary and historical nature. That's one of the reasons I became an art teacher and why this method lent itself really well for me. And it gets students looking at art, appreciating art, talking about art, which is a lifelong skill. So those are some of the reasons that I like DBAE. And it's not as popular anymore. STEAM, design thinking, choice-based art education is kind of taking the forefront. However, I think that it's something that we've all almost been ingrained. So it's something that we're doing, and then you can layer on top of it to make your learning even more rich. So I'd like to think of it as a foundation. And I want to talk a little bit about the history before I dive into what a typical lesson might look like. The appeal of thinking about teaching art in this particular way is actually was originally to help art become more valued of an academic subject. And so it kind of brought some sort of rigor and discipline to our field when it was introduced. It brought in other aspects besides production that classroom teachers and administration could understand, and it taught more concrete concepts to students. So I think that it was needed in that point in history in art education, and some might say that it's outdated now. Some might say that everything will look the same, and I don't necessarily think that's true. I consider DBAE for the production side, instead of teaching students to paint, copy a Monet, I would teach them to paint in the style of an impressionist. So they're getting a more open-ended response, a more open-ended project, but they're also still learning those concrete connections to history and culture. And so that's kind of how I personally approach DBAE. So in my curriculum, here's what a typical lesson or class period might have looked like. First of all, I'll use the example of the pisanki eggs from the Ukraine. It might look something like this. This is my sample. And I would start out always each lesson bringing students together and actually talking about the history and the culture. A video I like to show is Reshenka's Eggs by Patricia Polacco. And actually having some artifacts, some maybe little eggs that you could show that are decorated in different ways. There was a really good reading rainbow on it. Just showing them this method of decoration comes from a different culture. So there's your art criticism and your judgment. Talk about them, look about them. And then we'll go into the production. So the production aspect is not just make a Pisanki egg, but asking questions like, what symbols are used in many traditional Pisanki eggs, and how could I choose and use some of these symbols? What patterns might be used in a traditional Pisanki egg? And how can I mix and match and use those types of traditional patterns to create something that is my own but looks like the art of that culture or that type of project? And then another thing that's always important to add in is at the end a review of it. And it's not just a review of facts, but what makes this Pisanki? What aspects did you take? What did you add on your own? And then you can layer so many things in one lesson, obviously. Color theory, warm, cool colors, there's drawing skills, there's patterning, there's line, there's shape. So I feel like with DBAE, when you do add the culture and you do add the art production, there's so much more layering. And with the new visual art standards as well, the art criticism and the making judgments on artwork, you'll notice those really infused in the new visual art standards, which lends itself to DBAE as well. So that's a little bit about why I like teaching using DBAE and why you might consider looking at your curriculum a little differently to use some of the principles or revisit them if it's been a while. And I hope that it helps you as you're on your curriculum journey. Enjoy the rest of the class.